Suge Knight breaks his silence. New claims in the Tupac murder case for nearly 3 decades. One question has refused to disappear. Who really killed Tupac Shakur? Now, as the legal battle surrounding Duane, Keffe D. Davis continues to attract attention, Suge Knight has once again spoken about the case, and his comments raise some serious questions. Suge has repeatedly maintained that he did not order Tupac's killing. But this time, his focus appears to be somewhere else. The people connected to the case, the stories that have changed over the years, and what Keffe D has publicly said about his own past. And one thing is clear, Suge is not convinced by Keffe D's explanation that someone else wrote his book. According to Suge, Keffe D knows exactly what was written in that book. But why does Suge believe Keffe D has already said too much? And could the words spoken publicly over the years become more important than anyone expected? Let's break it down. Tupac's influence has never really disappeared. Even decades after his death, younger generations continue to discover his music, his message, and his story. Suge pointed to his own family as an example, explaining that Tupac's influence reaches people who were not even alive when the rapper was killed. For Suge, that is part of why the current case matters. He believes the tragedy should become a lesson, not just about Tupac, but about violence, loyalty, the music industry, and the consequences of decisions made decades ago. But the biggest controversy surrounding the case remains Keffe D. Prosecutors have pointed to statements Keffe D made publicly over the years, including accounts connected to his book and interviews. Keffe D has acknowledged his involvement in the events surrounding Tupac's killing, while also discussing the role of other people. More recently, questions have been raised over who actually wrote portions of his book. Suge's response: he essentially dismissed the explanation. In his view, Keffe D has already talked publicly about the story so many times that trying to distance himself from parts of it now raises even more questions. And that leads to one of the most interesting issues in this entire case. Can years of public statements come back to haunt someone in court? The answer could be extremely important. Suge also talked about the price he believes he has paid for being associated with Tupac's death. For years, his name has been connected to theories surrounding the murder. He has argued that those accusations damaged his freedom, business opportunities, and reputation. Suge has consistently denied ordering Tupac's killing. But he has also acknowledged something else the night Tupac was shot. The situation in Las Vegas was already extremely dangerous. Suge believes more should have been done to protect Tupac that night. That criticism does not necessarily establish responsibility for the murder, but it raises a painful question about security and decision-making on the night of September 7, 1996. And then there is the issue of the other people connected to the case. Suge has suggested that Keffe D was not acting completely alone. However, he has stopped short of publicly naming everyone he believes may have been involved. That has created another mystery. If Suge believes there are additional people who know the truth, why doesn't he simply name them? His answer has been consistent. He does not want revenge. He says he wants justice, but he also understands the consequences of making accusations without evidence. That distinction is important, because there is a massive difference between saying someone should be punished and saying investigators should follow the evidence wherever it leads. And that brings us back to Keffe D. One of the most striking arguments made in the discussion was that Keffe D has already publicly discussed his own version of events. If those statements are accurate, then investigators and prosecutors do not necessarily need to depend entirely on what other people say. They can examine what Keffe D himself has said, compare it with physical evidence, witness testimony, previous statements, and the known timeline of the night. That is where the case becomes much bigger than internet theories. Because a murder investigation cannot ultimately be solved by rumors. It has to be built around evidence. Another controversial part of the conversation involved allegations about Sean Diddy Combs. Suge's comments connected Diddy to theories that have circulated for years. But this is where viewers need to separate *** allegations from proven facts ***. There is a major difference between someone making a claim in an interview and a court establishing that claim as fact. Diddy has faced numerous allegations and legal controversies over the years, but claims connecting him to Tupac's murder should not automatically be treated as established fact simply because someone repeats them. That distinction matters, especially in a case that has generated decades of conspiracy theories. Another major theme in Suge's comments was loyalty. Tupac and Suge were closely connected through Death Row Records, and Suge has repeatedly spoken about the loyalty he believes people should have shown Tupac. He questioned whether enough people who once stood beside Tupac have remained consistent in the decades since his death. But there is another side to that argument. People change. Relationships change. The music industry changes. And after nearly 30 years, determining what someone knew when they knew it, and what they actually did is far more complicated than judging them based on who they associate with today. That is why the evidence in the murder case matters so much. Suge also reflected on Death Row Records itself. His argument was that mixing street conflicts with business created a dangerous environment. Death Row was one of the most powerful forces in hip-hop during the 1990s. But the same environment that created incredible music also brought rivalries, tension, violence, and enormous pressure. And according to Suge, that combination ultimately created consequences that went far beyond music. Then came another major point, ***, what does justice actually mean in the Tupac case? ***, for some people, justice means seeing Keffe D convicted if prosecutors prove their case. For others, justice means discovering every person who may have played a role. And for Tupac's fans, justice may simply mean finally understanding what happened that night. But Suge believes there is another problem. He argues that people have spent years talking about Tupac while avoiding the uncomfortable questions surrounding his death. And that is why the upcoming legal proceedings could be so significant. If Keffe D takes the stand, or if his previous statements become central to the case, the public could hear more about what he claims happened, who was present, and what he believes happened before and after the shooting. But again, claims are not convictions. The court will ultimately have to separate testimony from evidence. And that is what makes this story so compelling. For nearly 30 years, Tupac's murder has lived somewhere between history, hip-hop mythology, conflicting stories, and unanswered questions. Now, those old stories are being examined through a legal process. Suge Knight has made it clear that he does not believe every story being told about the case. He believes Keffe D has already revealed more than people realize. He believes other people may know more. And he continues to deny that he ordered Tupac's murder. But perhaps the biggest question is no longer simply, ***, who killed Tupac? ***, it may be, ***, who knew what happened, and why did it take nearly 30 years for the truth to reach a courtroom? ***, Tupac's music has survived. His influence has survived. His fans have survived. But the mystery surrounding his death has survived too. Now, with the legal case bringing old statements and old allegations back into the spotlight, the world is watching. If the evidence finally answers the questions that have remained unanswered for decades, the consequences could reach far beyond one courtroom. Because this isn't just about a rapper who died in 1996. It's about a case that changed hip-hop forever. And after all these years, the world is still waiting for one thing ***, the truth. ***,